Well, we are so joyed to be.
Keep going.
We're
This is going to
so
be great.
excited to have Alex Brightman on the pod, whose bio we'll be reading for a second time because of some grave errors in the first reading. But Alex went to the Tisch School of the Arts for 2 years, and we'll talk about his training there. He's been on Broadway in shows like Glory Days, which is Glory Day, maybe, is what you're telling
Yep,
me.
that's what we call it.
The Glory Day. He was Bach in Wicked. He was Michael Wormwood in Matilda the musical. He originated Beetlejuice in Beetlejuice, for which he received a Tony nom. Originated Dewey in School of Rock on Broadway, for which he received a Tony nom. He's been all over your TV and stuff like The Blacklist, Law and Order, SVU. Maybe if any of these things are true.
Yeah, they're all true.
All true. Okay. Well, an interesting beginning there of your bio. But Alex, how are you doing? Welcome on the pod. We're so excited to see you.
I'm fabulous. I'm happy to be here. I'm on vacation right now, so I'm like
Ooh.
I planned kind of this little press day for talking about Lou Berger and the Wizard of Friendship and all that, and to chat with people about anything and everything. So I'm happy to do this. It's kind of breaking up the wonderful laziness that is this
Yeah.
vacation. I
The
like to feel like
monotony of
I've done
vacation.
I feel like I've done something now. So
It makes me feel better about my life that you're not just living in a palace in New York. I was like, where could you be that you have these ceilings and this much light and this?
no, this is a rental that we saved a lot of money, and we ate peanut butter jelly sandwiches for weeks to kind of make this happen. So no palace, regular apartment that we rent in New York City, and this is a house we're renting once and probably once only at this point, which is just great. But
Popping the bubble for our listeners,
that's
popping the glorious bubble.
that's
But I'm
right.
gonna start you off with the same question I start all of our artist guests off, which is just if you can take me back a little to when you were thinking about college for the first time. So 16, 17, maybe even earlier, when you were thinking, hey, I think I maybe want to be an actor, if you were thinking that, and you were looking at what do I need out of a college experience that might get me there. Talk me through what was going on in your mind back then.
I preface this by saying that I'm not a great researcher still. So when I was looking at the idea of college, I just figured you went. I just didn't know
Hmm.
you had a choice, like you didn't do a gap year, whatever. So I had just kind of asked people and saw where people I liked went, and most of it was NYU. So I just heard
Hmm.
NYU, Tisch School of the Arts, and that's where you got to be. And so I had friends that I looked up to, so that's where I wanted to be. So when I started thinking about it, I thought about all the ones people talk about: Michigan, CCM, Carnegie Mellon, like all the ones that were out there when I was coming up. Um, and then what I ended up doing was I applied and got into the summer high school program at NYU.
Hmm.
So when I was a junior, I took whatever it is, a month and a half out there to sort of live what it would be, and I fell madly in love with it. The city, the whole atmosphere, the doing of classes. I was like, didn't have a lot of like acting classes where I'm from, which
Hmm.
is San Jose, California. I did community theater, but I didn't really invest in like the idea of classes. So this really spoke to me. And then I didn't want to go anywhere else. So I applied and I had good enough grades, I guess, and the audition kind of put me over, and I went. And
And
I guess I didn't look back.
at the time, were you thinking, hey, I want to be actively working in school? I guess I'm assuming that work is what pulled you out of school, though I guess that you can tell me if
Yep.
that's not true.
Yeah. I
But
mean, it was a
were you thinking I want to
combination.
be meeting casting directors and thinking about in classes, but actually actively working while I was in school?
Yeah, I learn by doing. I have a very hard time sitting still, and so I thought that being in acting school meant you're just up all the time doing stuff and being creative. And
Hmm.
when I went to NYU, and this is not to disparage NYU at all, because I think it's a fantastic school, and I'm glad I went. It just wasn't working for me at the time,
Hmm.
and that's perfectly okay. I found. Um, and so that was kind of part one of like, okay, I'm not feeling like I'm getting what I need out of this, just bits
Hmm.
and pieces, and nice to meet friends who have similar wants and ambitions. And then yes, and then I ended up auditioning. They kind of tell you not to audition while
Hmm.
you're there, and they want to kind of build you up. And but most people there, you're in New York City, so it's like hard to
Hmm.
like not get up for an open
Well,
call.
and you have casting directors can come to your shows, and I mean, just you now have the whole industry is available to come check you out and
W-
you know
and
smell you
yeah,
if you're
well,
right there.
and it's you're in New York, so you could go perform anywhere all the time. And so just the idea of relegating it to just one school thing that
Hmm.
they only when you are allowed to do it felt wrong to me. So I ended up auditioning, and after 2 years of a little bit of like being miserable, kind of what was going on with me at least, and getting very fortunate and booking something, I ended up
Mm-hmm.
getting a play, and I went to LA, and I took a leave of absence from school, which I'm still on, and I'm 36 years
Mm-hmm.
old.
Hey,
So I'm still
I
on a
believe in
very
you.
long
It can
leave of
happen.
absence.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll return. I probably won't.
And did you think about, so, as you're deciding to take that leave and maybe even thinking at the time or at some point, hey, this is probably permanent. Did you think about, there are things I want to make sure I continue training wise, whether it's about voice, acting, education stuff? Was there stuff that you go, what am I missing in those 2 years, or that you thought about, I want to continue this or complete this in some other way?
That's an excellent question. I do think about it. I think about, like, I know that everything kind of panned out okay, but like I wonder what I missed and what I would have enjoyed,
Mm-hmm.
were I to have just stuck it out. Um, but I find that I've looked back now, easier to say now because I look back on it, that I've found specialized ways of learning. And I think that's an
Mm-hmm.
important thing for people to hear when they go to college, because the college has a curriculum and a syllabus, and everything on the syllabus you're going to learn. But with theater and the arts, there is no cap to the learning. So that syllabus represents, like a glass of water in the ocean. It's like there's so much more to learn, but you as the actor, as the student, need to be aware enough to go, what am I missing? And what I was
Mm-hmm.
missing was improv, sketch comedy, comedy in general. Like, I spent so much time not wanting to go to dance class. And if I just did, I would be missing out on all this stuff I really want to do. And you really only get one shot at this. So specialization became kind of this
Mm-hmm.
like extracurricular for me that I'm glad I stuck with.
And does that mean, when you thinking about stuff like comedy, like, are you thinking like, I'm going to go take UCB classes, or I'm
Yeah.
going to go, like, are you doing it was literally classes, not just while you're in the show, I'm going to work on this comedy?
Well, right, but I think that it's everything. I think that, yes, I sought out certain things and classes, by the way, some of which were free, and I just want that
Mm-hmm.
to be out there because I think people need to know that to take class or to learn, you do not need to necessarily have the means to afford it. Like, I think if you're smart, you can find free stuff, especially with
Mm-hmm.
the internet now. I mean, you can take full acting classes online for free. You can watch every single performance that has ever been, you know,
Mm-hmm.
on screen, and now all that is learning, all that is class, if you do it the right way. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to do outside work on what I was being, to fill in the gaps. And yeah, in shows you get the benefit of time, because once your show's up and
Mm-hmm.
running, you have your whole day. And I don't like to rest on the idea that, oh, I just have my show at night, that's when I'll work. I want to work on the stuff that I'm not working on in the show.
Mm-hmm. Totally cool. Tell me a little bit about that. And by the way, very well said, I think, in the online of it all, of creating your own drinking of the ocean. That's not just
I
in
think
that little
so,
cup.
yeah.
Yeah. But tell me a little about your journey from, landing that play in LA to now moving to New York for the One Glory Day, and then Bach and Wicked. So how, because it seems like, just when a quick glance at the bio,
Hmm.
it seems like, whoa, this is really exciting. You found Broadway success in a way that a lot of people find Broadway success, but it's so exciting. And then all of a sudden it's like, and we'll talk about the second half of it, this journey to, oh my God, I'm originating two lead roles on Broadway. It's a whole other life. But tell me about that first sort of jump to, I'm doing it. I'm on Broadway, and I'm playing some cool roles.
I'll answer that with starting at Wicked, because Glory Days is, it's kind of its own, like, really micro, thing.
Totally, yeah.
That's its own wild and wacky story that does not really represent a lot of like what it means to be in a show consistently on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
With Wicked, for me, it was a huge. I learned that a lot of the stuff is the same. Like doing community theater, like a lot of the stuff on stage, acting with your friends, rehearsing, that is all of the same. I mean, it's at a bigger
Mm-hmm.
budget and you're getting paid and there's like more people watching you. But what I learned and what I started to figure out that nothing could have taught me, and I think that they should teach this in college, is how to do an 8 show week, is how to
Mm-hmm.
be a professional outside and inside of your show, how to be a leading human being. Um, like, not just a leading man, because I played Bach. I was in the ensemble of Big Fish. I
Mm-hmm.
was, so I didn't lead these shows, but leadership skills
Mm-hmm.
are so important in a show, no matter who you're playing, no matter who you are.
Mm.
And so I think when I got on Broadway, I thought I like reached the pinnacle and that's it. But it's like there's such learning lessons to have to be successful
Mm-hmm.
and consistent as a working actor that really is hard to teach. And I think if somebody were able to come up with that kind of curriculum, they would have invented a really better mousetrap.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. And how, I have this question for later on in the show, but I'm inspired to ask it now. Just how are you thinking about stuff like type? That we've had a couple conversations of type on the show, and it seems like, and maybe we can get into um, Bach to Dewey or to however you want to think of the transition. But it seems like you have had some experiences where you really were sort of playing into a very commercially understandable type. Sometimes where you're going, I'm getting to expand in and around it. But are you thinking about that? Are you thinking about here's a definable role that I fit into and that I can use as a brand? How are you sort of considering those questions?
First of all, I'm offended that you don't think that Bach to Dewey is a natural transition. Thinking about that is actually so crazy to think like what I
You made
looked
it look
like. Oh,
natural.
thank you, thank
Yeah,
you very much. Yes,
yeah.
honestly, I like doing theater. So like for me, it was never about a brand or like how to, market myself. I don't know if I've ever
Hmm.
been amazing at that. I think I am fine at putting myself out there and making conversation, but no, I never thought about it really as like here's a role I'd want to play or here's because I think it's crazy to assume that you're going to get it, number 1,
Hmm.
because there's billions of actors and why would anybody get
Hmm.
anything?
Hmm.
So I am a believer in like the harder you work, the luckier you get. So but I don't know if I think about it in the scope of like branding and who and like what I am and what I represent. I just want to work. And so
Hmm.
I try my best to make enough connections and enough fans that more people want me in more rooms. And if it means I'm playing the third shrub to the left, I hope that I can find some like really amazing stuff there. But as long as I'm on stage and I have some light on me, I'm happy. And I think that you get to a point in your career like now, like with the 2 Tony nominations, where nobody can see that as anything but me trying to be fake humble. But like, I would
Uh-huh.
so much rather be in a show in any part than not in a show waiting for the right part.
Uh-huh. And was there a point in the career, I guess, where you are saying no to third shrub on the left because of the possibility of Dewey, or because I guess was there a point where I kind of assume there is a yes, but was it a conscious moment when you're saying it's not just going to naturally build, but I am going to say I think I am. I think I've learned these leadership skills, and I think I'm ready to lead a company in a new show, and and so I'm not going to take this other thing that would take me away. Did that happen to you at
I've
some point?
embraced it. I think it didn't. It was thrust upon me by my wonderful representatives, like my manager,
Mm-hmm.
who was the
Mm-hmm.
first to tell me like this, whatever this role was offered to me or that I auditioned for, I wanted to audition for, in no uncertain terms, they were like, "This is not your next thing." And to hear that is hard because you're like,
Uh-huh.
"I want to do this." But
Uh-huh.
sometimes what it's about is it just takes you away or takes you out of contention for the next thing that potentially would be worth the squeeze. So I've embraced it. It's hard because you just want to say yes to everything. And I feel very lucky that I get to be privileged enough now and have worked hard enough that I do get to be a little choosy. And I don't think that'll last. I don't think it lasts for anybody. I think you have your time and
Mm-hmm.
and you get to do with what you want. I'm a big believer in momentum. So I've been trying to use
Mm-hmm.
that for the last decade and a half and to
Mm-hmm.
success. But yeah, I mean I think I have embraced where I am. Like I know where I sit now in the world of theater, that I am a veteran that can be trusted. So if someone allows
Mm-hmm.
me to choose something, I will choose carefully.
Yeah, I love that. And it's something, it's a really, I think, a really smart way to think about if you're going to choose not to think about conversations of type or brand or status. I guess we're in some ways you're saying that with third shrub on the
Sure.
left, but to say I have people who will do some of that for me, because the industry is going to some extent going to consider that and see. So for you to be able to go, well, I'm able to listen to people who are thinking that way, and that lets me not have to think that way.
And I
Lets
will
me,
say this
follow
is
my heart.
a direct quote from my wife, but also who's a casting director, and other casting directors I've heard say this, which is so many actors will find ways to not audition for something or not do
Uh huh.
something because they're afraid or they're anxious or whatever, or they're self-conscious or they have imposter
Yep.
syndrome. And the way they'll do that is that they'll just type themselves out of a role. They'll say, "Oh, this
Yes.
isn't for
Yep.
me. Someone else would be." But and I've been
Yep.
told time and time, I've done it. I mean, I've been that guy, and I've been told time and time again, you are not responsible for typing you out of something. You may be the right thing that they don't
So
know
true.
they're looking for. And so I do, I try actively to not think about that now, because it is like if somebody asks me to audition for something, it means that they think
Right.
there might be potential there.
They want to use it. Yes, maybe you're the 5% chance, but there's some chance or they wouldn't be wasting their
And
time.
it's
That's
always nice to
totally.
be seen.
Ain't that the truth? But so tell me a little bit about that progression from. All right, so now you aren't playing third shrub on the left or doing one day musicals. You now are playing two pretty iconic originating
Yeah.
roles. What was that momentum build like, and when do we start appreciating? When do we start feel like, oh my God, this is real? It's really happening. Like, how was that experience?
I mean, it was wacky because it happened in the way that you hear in like on Smash. Like, you know what I mean? It happened in a way that
Mm-hmm.
is not normal. So I say that really, really pointedly that like what happened to me was not like the like, and then you did this, and then you did this, and obviously you
Mm-hmm.
did this. I did a workshop of School of Rock where I played an ensemble member. I did a reading.
Mm-hmm.
The director took a shine to me personally, knew I was a writer, knew I did improv. So they brought me in to sing some stuff. They found that I played guitar.
Mm-hmm.
They offered me the workshop to workshop the role. Pretty much every
Mm-hmm.
step of the way, I knew because they told me I was not going to play the role. You know, they were like,
Right. You're gonna be stunt cast
they're gonna,
later.
yeah,
We'll
you're
bring in
gonna
a
help
celebrity.
develop the role. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, I had had a reputation of doing anyway, so I was thrilled to be a part of
Yep.
it. To meet Andrew Lloyd
And
Webber, I
brought
was
some
how do you say no
opportunity.
to that? And
Yep.
to eventually be able to point to a show and go, I helped with that. That's really cool.
Yep.
And then what
Yep.
happened was we did two big runs of the show in the rehearsal room, and enough of Andrew Lloyd Webber or whoever's fancy friends said, "That's your guy." Like, there's no,
Mm-hmm.
that's the right guy. Forget celebrity. This will sell tickets. The show
Mm-hmm.
will sell if this guy's in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they had enough good faith and trust and risk. I guess they were out of their minds a little to hire an essential nobody who was about to do his fifth Broadway show, but to
Mm-hmm.
just do it. And so that next day, when they told me I was going to do it, everything changed. There was no progression. It was like I went
Mm-hmm.
from a
It's a jump.
utility player who was probably pretty good at character acting and improv and doing a bunch of workshops to being the
Uh-huh.
star of Andrew Lloyd Webber's next Broadway show overnight.
It's yep.
And it it's I just now, I think, really understand what that means and what the responsibility of that is and what it did for me. But in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
dude, there's like no way to prepare yourself to just have 50 newspapers in 50 states have your name in it that day.
Right. It's almost I mean, it's the positive version of the actor's nightmare or whatever. You're like, oh my God,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
doing
like
this now. This is real.
yeah, it's like the worst and best lottery that you win. Like, you're like, everything changes completely and
Yeah.
there is a total ambivalence. You're like, this is unbelievable. Oh my God, what do
Uh-huh.
I do with this?
Yep. It's so funny. I mean, I think there are really no normal paths of like this is how it
True.
always goes. There's sort of what we picture as like at least a steady progression. But I'll say like what you just described sounds very similar. We just had Jessie Mueller on the pod. It sounds very similar to
I
her experience that she was developing on a clear day. She was like maybe you'll be the cover. They were told that directly. So for all those people out there who are playing development roles expecting covers, it's obviously possible. The same way that being a reader, you can get
I
cast. It's unusual, but not
know it
remarkable.
happens, but I also think it speaks to like your perspective. Like, if you are told, even if you're blatantly told you will not play this role, that in my
Uh
opinion
huh.
does not mean that your response should go, well, then I'll do this at 70% then. Like, I just think
Right.
that
Yep.
everything is for something later, even if it's for that role. If not, maybe it was for
Right.
something else. But also, if you're not in the room giving 100%, I don't care who you are. I just think that that's a crazy
Mm.
thing to give anything less than 100%, whatever your 100% is, by the way, because it's different. And that could mean something totally different. But to not do that when you have so little
Yep.
chances to do it, because theater doesn't give you amazing chances all the time. Why would you go like, well, I'll only do it if, just do it.
Yep. Yep. So true. Can we talk? We'll do one more question, then we'll do a little break. We'll do a deep dive. We'll get
Oh,
into our
wow.
game. But can we talk about your chords of steel? Because I have no idea if this is your reality, but you seem to be able to, in the things I've seen you, and you seem to be able to sustain singing and speech in a way that it sounds like it would be very effortful to the average
Yeah.
person. Like, is that something that is trained? Is that just something you feel like you were born with? What do you do to take care of
Hmm.
your voice if you're doing a long Beetlejuice, you're doing along School of Rock. Like, tell me about these chords of steel
I
that I've
think the
heard about.
chords of steel were a real thing that developed when I was young, and my parents raised me on crazy, rock and roll gospel music and Hall and Oates and Todd Rundgren and Aerosmith. And so I think you grow up and your
Mm-hmm.
vocal cords are muscles, so they get stronger or weaker depending on how you use them. So I think mine grew up strong. However,
Uh huh.
during School of Rock, I believed the same thing you just said. I believed that I was, totally unbreakable and cords of steel, and I've been
Uh-huh.
told that, I recover quickly. And then on stage
Uh-huh.
during a, sleepy Wednesday matinee, I hemorrhaged a vocal cord. And so,
Oof.
and what that means, technically, what it means is your vocal cord stretches, or it's used to a point where it starts to bleed or bruise, and you can't use it
Mm-hmm.
as well or at all. And so I had this real scary, scared straight moment of like, okay, so it's not effortless. And if you don't do it the right way,
Mm-hmm.
your career's over. So from that moment
Mm-hmm.
up until this day, I'm talking to you, I started kind of in this journey of like vocal health and really warming up, training, being with a vocal pathologist, vocal coach, doing all the things I could to make sure things would just go right from now on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little more of a sacrifice than I wanted to do because it feels kind of boring. No one likes to do voice lessons.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who.
Right. Much easier to walk in and be like, I
Yeah,
sound amazing. I didn't
exactly. I
even
don't care who
practice.
you
Yeah.
are. If you're, no one's skipping
Yeah.
into a voice lesson. It feels like you're going to the principal's office.
Yeah.
And so, but you got to do it, and it works. And so
Yeah.
my thing was like with the
Yep.
Beetlejuice voice, I went at it completely on a health way. I didn't look at it like, let's create it first and then figure out how to make it healthy. That was going to be the total wrong
Uh-huh.
thing to do. So we went at it slowly but surely. And thankfully, Beetlejuice developed for that long that we could give it the time it deserved. And
Uh-huh.
so it was a little bit of both. I found the grit myself where it was in my voice. And then I used my vocal coach, pathologist, and ENT to make sure I wasn't damaging myself. And slowly we built it from being able to do it for 5 minutes to 15 minutes to 2.5 hours.
You just gave me like the perfect. We were talking about little basketball before we started recording. You gave me the perfect like basketball analogy. It was like you as like you're singing Hall and Oates is like your MJ like holding on to
Yeah.
the pull up bar to stretch
Yep.
and get taller, right? Like all these invincible athletes up to a certain point, and then they hit mid career and they're like, all right, it's time to start using the hyperbaric
Right.
chamber and extend my career. I'm not actually invincible just because I'm incredibly
Yeah,
strong.
I find, yeah,
That's
I
interesting to
think
hear.
that a little bit of humility and a little bit of like self-awareness is really good for a long career because you need
Mm,
to know that you're just going to get older and you're going to get uh I just think you get, and I say this in a good way, I think you get worse. And so you have to keeping an eye on that when you get older and
yes.
more worn. And God, I sound like I'm 90 when I'm saying this. Um,
We
and
get it's true. I'm just I'm like I'm
in
down the slide. It's
right,
all
in
downhill from
theater
here.
years I'm 90. I'm 36, but I feel like it's like
Yeah,
dog years.
for sure.
And we're just pickled by air conditioning, which is why I look so good. um yeah, for
That's
those
what
of
it
you
is.
listening, I don't. But uh
For those of you
he
listening,
does,
he
that's right.
does.
uh but yeah, I think that it's about health is important, and I think artists have a hard time putting time aside for health because it doesn't feel artsy.
Yes. And as our therapists would say, the real strength is realizing you
I
do
love
have a
that.
breaking
I
point.
do.
That's
Yes,
the
I
real
do. I
strength.
agree with that.
Yeah. Well, on that weird note, let's take a break, and on the back end, we'll dive into some comedy with
Oh, good.
Alex Brightman. Back in a flash. All right, we are back with the great Alex Brightman, and we're gonna dive deeper into some comedy. You keep laughing every time I say the great. Is it that?
It's
Is that
just
what it
well,
is?
it's just it's I'm so flattered that you know my full name, that like
That
Alex Brightman is short for the great Alex Brightman.
you were far from the first person who, when hearing their name said twice, or you said Fuller, like that feels so weird. But it's like I'll say from our students' perspective, none of them would be like, "Yeah, of course it's Alex Brightman." No, like
Well, that's very
that's how
nice.
they see you, and that's
It's
how we
it's
see
just
you.
very nice, and it's I don't know how to react to hearing that. So that's really just my defense mechanism is to laugh.
Oh, good. We'll do more therapy. Yeah, I heard defense mechanism. So we're going to pause the podcast and get into it.
All
No,
right.
let's chat about. So, with each of our artists, we try to do a little bit of like a granular deep dive of like one specific subject. We did this a little bit with Annalie Ashford. We talked about sort of comedy in
Uh-huh.
general, but I want to like maybe zoom in on physical comedy. Not that
Sure.
you don't also understand all kinds of comedy, but I just do think it's something that you're really remarkable at, and
Thanks.
it's such a part of the musical theater canon, of the sort of
Yeah.
some kind of broad physical comedy, not always broad, but some kind of a physical comedy. So I want to get a little of that and maybe just start off with how do you approach that? You kind of mentioned this is my vocal approach to Beetlejuice to make sure it's
Right.
sustainable. How do you approach, let's just broadly comedy when creating a character, but maybe then especially if we're going to posit that a Dewey or a Beetlejuice, have some things that are kind of different about them than Alex Brightman. So you were putting some character on
Yeah.
the character there. How do you explore those differences, as you're in a room?
I think the short answer is trial and a lot of error.
Mm-hmm.
But that trial part is crazy important. And depending on the role, I mean, I think theater in general is a full contact sport. Like you can't point to many shows that don't take something physical out of you.
Uh-huh.
But with like School of Rock, it was, jumping off things and sliding around, cartwheels and, all that kind of stuff. And Beetlejuice was less stamina, but more physical
Uh-huh.
contortion kind of
Uh-huh.
stuff. And that just comes from like, I mean, I've said this before a lot recently, but it's like the more you fall on your face, the more, and I mean that physically and
Metaphorically.
metaphorically and
Yeah.
dramaturgically and all the table, the you just are able to sort of make the sieve that you run your choices through
Uh-huh.
smaller, so that when you start like getting choices that fall through your head, you go, "That's not a Beetlejuice choice. That's not a Beetlejuice choice.
Uh-huh.
Oh, there's one," and it catches. And then you want to invest in it. And my advice, not that this is completely unsolicited, but I think is worth hearing, is that when you are developing something physically, because I try everything. I walk into a room and I've just Carrie Butler said she explains like being in a rehearsal room with me. These are her words, not mine.
Uh-huh.
She says being in a rehearsal room feels dangerous. She says
Like,
it feels like rehearsing with a tornado. I think she said,
uh-huh.
or something.
Uh-huh.
Mainly just because I look at rehearsal like a process. I don't
Yep.
look at it as a means to an end. And sometimes that doesn't work for people because they need to stage something.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been really lucky to work with people that just allow me to do what I need to do because
Mm-hmm.
I've earned the trust. I didn't just walk in and say, I know better than all of you. So you earn the opportunity to mess around, and you earn the opportunity to take an hour and go, what if it's all this?
Uh-huh.
And the whole day could be wrong. You could
Uh-huh.
burn a whole day doing that, but at the
Uh-huh.
very least, now you know what you're not doing. But the advice is, once you find the thing, make sure you can do it more than 10 times a week, because
Uh-huh.
the mistake I made in School of Rock was saying yes to everything.
Uh-huh.
And what that ended up doing was hemorrhaging a vocal cord, hurting my knees, my
Uh-huh.
back is no longer the same, my ankle is no longer the same.
Oof. Yep.
And I learned all those lessons. And for Beetlejuice, my whole show, I could do 10 times a week
Uh-huh.
if I needed to,
Uh-huh.
because of all the work we did physically. I knew what I was capable of, and I knew what absolutely no way in hell could I do more than once a week. And then no matter how much I love that choice, it
Uh-huh.
has to not happen.
Uh-huh. It's such good advice. But I want to hear more about, and I was really great analogy of both the trial and error, but then also sort of the sieve. In that trial and error, what makes something an error? What makes something, like, is it the rehearsal? Like I say, it's a comedic choice in this case. Is it the rehearsal
Yeah.
room and laughs? Is it more your own instinct? Like, because if you're making a choice and you go, it didn't get a laugh, but is there some part of you goes, but there's something there. I want to. Do I need to tweak it? I think I'm on that path to it. Who is the judge and the jury in this trial and
It's a
error
great
situation?
question. That is an excellent, excellent question. I'm not sure there's like a concise, concrete answer to this, but I think it's kind of all that you said. But you need to be really, really self-aware and
Mm-hmm.
honest with yourself that not everything you do is genius. And I think that with comedians and egotists, and I'm speaking about myself,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people
Those
that
are the
have
same. Those are the same. The comedians, the egotists. That was one
narcissist,
word.
right?
Yeah,
We're all the
exactly.
same kind of people that
Slash
like
slash slash. Yeah.
thrive. Well, we thrive on also like instant feedback,
Uh-huh.
and if it's not good, it's offensive, or
Uh-huh.
could be. But if you are able to kind of take yourself out of the equation and go, okay, what is good for the show?
Yep.
I think that that's a really good, again, with the sieve thing. It's like, I liked this choice and I'm going to mourn not being able to
Mm-hmm.
make this choice again, but it's clearly not working.
Yep.
And and I think this comes with time and experience. Like, this wasn't always how I felt, or how I did it, or how I got good at it. You can see merit in a bad bit and develop and work on it.
Uh-huh.
But for the most part, your first instincts are usually the right ones. You just have to
Uh-huh.
figure them out. But it it is about being free enough to feel like a fool in front of others,
Uh-huh.
knowing that they are going to lift you up when it gets right. They're
Hmm.
not going to go home and go, look at all those bad choices. That like you have to get rid of that
Right.
mindset that people are going to go
No one
home
is
and
thinking
talk
like that.
about you.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
they'll
no,
talk about you for sure, but they're
and
not like that.
nobody,
Yeah.
but really, truly, nobody is going home. And the interesting conversation with their significant other is the things that didn't work in rehearsal.
That laugh is half as big as it used to be, and I think it's
Yeah,
Alex's fault. Like, no,
well, that's
that's
right.
just
And
not.
like,
That's
but I am an anxious,
uh-huh.
person with imposter syndrome when I first get into a process. And so I
Hmm.
always think every choice has to be right. And so the more I can jettison that idea and just go, we have 6 hours in this room.
Yep.
This scene is 4 pages. We cannot just run the scene over.
Right.
Let's screw some shit up.
Let's try. Yeah.
Let's try.
Well, and what about the other side of things where when you get something very right, oh my God, we found a bit that's really funny, maybe early in the process. How do you deal with that early success? Like, are you logging it and going away from it because you're like, that's not going to be funny for the next 2 months of the rehearsal room and then it's going to die? Or are
That's
you the person who goes, keep twisting, keep refining? Like, how do you deal with that win when it happens?
that is a question that speaks so near and dear to my heart. And I don't know if I've ever gotten that question before. Rob McClure and I were just talking about this. Like
Hmm.
when a bit works early, that's a
Oof,
curse.
dangerous.
It's dangerous because what ends up happening is two things in a rehearsal room, which can go really wrong for an audience later. One is the laugh gets a crazy big laugh because it's never happened before and it's hitting people
Uh-huh.
for the first time. The more you rehearse it, no one's going to laugh because they know the
Right.
joke's coming. But you have to trust that when I said first instinct, you have to
Yes.
keep remembering the first time that hit people because that's how it's going to hit an audience for the first
Yep.
time. So you keep those, you keep the gold, you keep the bits. You can continue to do other things, but this is part two. The other
Yep.
dangerous thing is when people start to laugh at you and not the
Uh-huh.
bit, it's because they know you. Fellow actors in
Uh-huh.
the room will laugh at things because you're you.
Uh-huh.
But people buying a ticket to the show are laughing at the characters' choices, and you have to remember that they don't know you, so they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you're just funny.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's super important to understand that if your bits work in the room, great, but understand why. Because if
Yes.
I've seen so many people do an amazing bit that worked just for their friends because they know a certain
Yes.
context, as we had lunch at Panera and something funny happened,
Uh-huh.
and the audience goes, I don't even know what
Huh?
Panera is.
Yeah.
I don't care
It's
about this.
it's so true. And there's when you're at step one, I've watched a lot of young actors and shows just put more and more blood into the thing that worked, not
Yeah,
knowing why it didn't work. And then by the time they're done, it actually doesn't work in front of an audience anymore
at
either
all.
because
Right.
they've squeezed it and twisted it to keep trying to get to chase that
Well,
laugh.
you forgot what it was. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like it's just you can't get back to that original thing. So repetition is good. That I talk a lot about changing things up and mixing things up. But when you find something that is good, it is important to write that down or remember it because it is. And that's the same thing with auditions, by the way. I would say, and
Hmm.
callbacks is that people tend to like call back
Yes.
the same scene, like four
Yep.
times, and you as the actor think, oh, I have to change it and evolve it.
Yep.
It's actually totally wrong.
Right. They're
The
bringing
reason
new
they're
people in to see the
yes,
thing that
yes,
worked.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I think that a few people understand that, but I think a majority of actors need to hear that because you booking a
Yep.
role is imperative on you being consistent.
Yep, it's so true. It's so true. What about? I'm gonna ask you a very specific thing because it's you did it so well in both School of Rock and Beetlejuice. Uh, this thing seems to exist in the musical theater sometimes, where you have a scene or a song or a moment that is not particularly funny on the page that needs to become funny, right? Like
All
so,
right.
because there's something where it's like we've got a scene where it's like this is kind of funny, let's make it funny together or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like if you are given a bit of physical comedy where it's like hey, make something here, right? And hopefully your director doesn't actually say to you, hey, this is fun, make something funny here. But
Well,
if that's the direction
you'd
you
be
got,
surprised. Yeah,
okay, so if you
yeah,
do get
yeah,
that direction,
yeah.
how do you approach that when you're like, I'm basically starting from, I have like the snippet of a song that's not funny, but now I know I've got, I'm grabbing a prop, I'm grabbing or whatever, and I'm trying to make something funny out of nothing. What is that physical exploration like? Like, how do you approach the storytelling? How do you approach that trial and error? What are you doing to explore a sort of physical bit, if we're going to call it that?
For me, I think it starts before the physical bit of this. Is what you just said about when you have something that you consider not funny.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's undeniable that you get to a thing and you're like, I wouldn't have written it that way, or that's
Right.
like but you are not the
I don't get the
writer,
joke.
and
Yeah.
most of the time you don't have the green light to go to the writer and go, hey, this isn't funny.
Uh-huh.
And as a writer, I totally now get that tenfold. Like, if somebody comes up to you and goes, I don't think this is the right line, you're like, how
Yeah.
dare you?
How dare you? I gave you a banana. It's funny.
It's funny.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is funny. Why? Because it's funny.
Yeah.
But I think that I tend to do a better job of trying to forget that part and just going, this is funny. Okay.
Uh-huh.
This is funny. Sure. Let's assume it's funny. Okay.
Uh-huh.
That's fine. Let's assume it's funny is always good. Assuming the best out of a bit is always going to help, in the same way, like when you play a bad guy, you don't know he's a bad guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you assume the best in a bit, and then I always like to look at what's there. So you read them. I have to read. You have to read the material. People try to like look at a bit once, try to memorize, and go, "What can I do with this?"
Uh-huh.
Read it. Read the bit. Enjoy the bit. Invest in the bit. Look at it like an audience member. Stop looking at it like choices right away. In the same way you try
Uh-huh.
to like memorize line by line, read the scene first. Then your
Mm-hmm.
memorizing is going to be great. So read the bit. How does it fit into the scene? If you have questions about it, though, ask the writer. What is
Mm-hmm.
this? Not this isn't funny, because let's make it work. And so
Mm-hmm.
physicalizing it, whatever it is, I try to see what is the most obvious choice to make, and then work backwards. What's the least obvious choice to
Mm-hmm.
make? Because all of them are valid. Because sometimes the obvious choice is the funniest one, right? Falling
Mm-hmm.
down, farting, whatever. All that's funny, right?
Farting is fun. I have a 1.5-year-old. Farting is funny to her. I'm like, why? How? Why is it
It's
funny
the
to you? Yet?
best.
You don't know enough to
It
make it.
is. It's the
She loves
funniest
it.
thing in the world. That's
Yeah. Toot
that's
toot.
it's the best.
Blowing your nose, boogers. The
Yeah.
first time we said boogie to her, she broke laughing. I'm like, what? Why are these things funny?
I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of bass humor,
Mm.
because I think that there's a reason it exists. There's a reason. It's just big fan of
Mm-hmm.
the reverence of what came before all of this specificity, is
Mm-hmm.
good. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that I have found the most success in seeing what is there. Okay, this is obvious. And then really going home with it and not leaving your script at
Mm-hmm.
the door, and taking your job home with you a little bit and just thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
What's the least I can do with this? Too. Like
Mm-hmm.
cuz nothing's funny, Like nothing can be very funny. A look is very
Uh-huh.
funny. Something that is big, and also remember what show you're in. That's the big
Uh-huh.
Beetlejuice lesson I learned. The show is big enough, so if you're
Uh-huh.
big on top of that shit, it's like it actually feels
To have them have.
cringy, and it
Yeah.
feels like you're doing too much. If you let the show work for you, that being said, if you're
Uh-huh.
in a much more subtle, nuanced show, a big choice might be very funny.
Uh-huh.
So it's contextual. It is about the whole of the show. Are you doing something
Yep.
that is just for you? Um,
Yep.
and sharing a
That
physical
totally makes
bit is
sense.
fun too. I mean, like being able to share with somebody like Rob McClure is a person who I think I'm creative, and then I saw Rob McClure
Uh-huh.
in a rehearsal room, and that guy literally throws himself to
Uh-huh.
the ground for bits,
Uh-huh.
and it works, and he's funny, and does it whatever. I'm constantly inspired by people that are using their body to make comedy or drama, but like using
Mm-hmm.
your body is full. I mean, where else do you get to do that?
It's so true, yeah, and especially as an adult person, it feels like as
Right.
kids sometimes we get to do that, but like when else, as a 37-year-old whatever person, do you get a chance to do
You're
that?
totally right.
Um, what about like a show like Beetlejuice, which I think feels like, I mean, School of Rock too, but I'm thinking specifically Beetlejuice. It feels like there's so much improv
Hmm.
in it, so much. Clearly, there are some moments that I'm like, this is because the audience member sneezed, or because that you're able to live in that world, and some of it probably improv discovered within the room and those kind of things. How much shifts from night to night? How much is new, versus micro shifts within a pretty well structured plan? How much is like really, were you really doing new?
Uh, the honest answer is night to night, less than you'd think, because the
Mm-hmm.
show lent itself in the room to so many iterations of certain bits that really sometimes I'm just
Uh-huh.
pulling from the gold mine. Um,
Yep.
and then, there are the things where you're just dealing in the moment, with a heckler or
Right.
somebody who thinks they should be in the show, then you're like, have to shut that down.
Uh-huh.
But the trust is a big thing in comedy, especially with writers and directors. If you gain their trust, the more latitude you're given. Depends on the show, but
Uh-huh.
like Beetlejuice was this borscht belt comedian narrator type, and so they had to give me some latitude. They can't. I
Right.
Being rigid in that role makes no sense.
Right.
So they knew that I came from a core of improv. We improvised bits to life in the room. So there are things in the show that are scripted that came out of improv, which is why it feels that way. So
Yes,
the greatest
totally feels that
compliment
way.
we got in the show was like, a lot of that felt made up. And we're like, well, that's because at some point it was.
It was.
But that goes along with keep the bits that work. Like the ones that people love the most were ones that were from 5 years ago. I mean, it was, and they just work. And our job is to forget that they're 5 years old.
And when do you? So, just for people who maybe don't know specifically the Broadway process, is that now in previews? Like, when are you getting to that point? Right before you enter previews? When are you starting to go? All right, in my calculus of trial error, I have all these choices, but some of these things obviously need to be set if it's in a manic sequence of set changes, and you can't totally mess up timing stuff like that.
Right.
When are you going? All right, let's lock this in while keeping it not locked, keeping it not stale. But when are you trying to say by this time I mean, is it opening night? Like, when are you at the point where you're going, it's truly locked, some of these little internal bits?
Some of them are never locked, which is nice. But some of it, I think that you're right. Like right around, during tech where is like, for people that have never done a long tech process of a show, that's when you lose your show because you don't have any rhythm anymore. You're just stopping and starting. So that's a good time to start when you're doing a bit over and over and over again on stage with a cavernous house that's not laughing. You get to a point where you go, nope, this has to be the bit. This is it. And then when you get to previews, that's when you get this added instant feedback from the audience and you go, all right, the bit doesn't work. Sure. So you're tweaking. By opening for Beetlejuice, I think like 90% of the show, that might be a little low. 95% of the show was locked, like things we liked, things we did. But 5% is a lot. And so the 5% of latitude that I was mainly given, and it was mainly generated by me, I always treated with respect because one, the show needs to be a certain length. Two, the show's not
you got a stage manager who's going to yell at you.
We have a stage manager trying to call the thing.
As long.
They're trying to call the thing. And, I made the stage manager's job very easy because they knew they were in good hands. And I think that came from the rehearsal room, the trust that you build over time. The person who didn't have a very easy time was the person running spotlights.
Just finding
me, and if ever there was a sub spotlight, God bless, the audience basically caught like the my right foot every once in a while. But because I know the show so well, I thought of it like almost I just said this recently, it's like bowling. It's like we put the bumpers up, and I think the bumpers are the show, and the lane is like you can throw whatever you want, but the bumpers are there to make double sure
within the lane.
Yeah, as long as you stay in your lane, you know what show you're doing, and you know where you are and what needs to be happening. And for my sake, reading a crowd, because there are some actors that will bash a joke over the head, and the audience doesn't laugh 6 weeks in a row, and you're like, "What are you doing?" Like you can't. At this point, it's not the audience's fault. You have to change. You have to evolve.
Your ego.
And so I think it is good to listen. It's good to keep reinvesting in whatever you're doing, and it's okay that things can change slightly. It's live.
Yep. Well, we talk about that in so many different contexts, but the idea of structure can create creativity. That it's actually hard to be creative in a completely wide open.
100% agree.
Giving yourself enough structure, now you're safe, and now you really can bounce between those bumpers.
I love we as young actors always want like ultimate freedom, and then when we get it, we're like, well, but not ultimate freedom,
But some
rules, tell me what
though,
I can't do, and when you I mean it's really, you don't want to do that. I think creating with structure is that's well put.
It's the definition of style too, in a lot of ways. Like when people are like, what style is show? And it's like style can feel limiting, but I'm like, style is also what can create creativity. So we're all on the same page creating together. And anyway, whole other deep dive conversation, but we've got to play our game.
Okay.
Alex, we've got to play our game. This game, so each artist gets a game. Sometimes it's silly and I make them spell or I make them do weird things. This is a very simple trivia game.
I'm ready.
I'm not on a good roll with my game. I've not been explaining them well, so I'm going to really try to make sure I explain it, though I do think it's an easy enough game to understand. The game is called the Magic Rule of Three, okay? A la Beetlejuice. I'm going to ask you some fun trivia questions about words and phrases that are repeated 3 times. So I'll give you little hints, but you're going to have to just give me the word that is repeated 3 times.
Okay, yeah, of course.
You don't have to say it 3 times.
Oh, of course I will. Are you nuts? Of course I will.
I think this is going to be hard. Okay. But fair is what I think, and I'm not always right. The audience sometimes says I have.
Well, I don't. I don't care. So it's like I don't. This game, in a
What a spectrum it can be. Josh Segarra, when he played this game, was sweating and like punching his computer screen when he got right
isn't
answers. Alex is going to sit back and relax the body. It's a very different
isn't
body than
by the
you know.
way,
Josh.
I went to school with Josh. I was in an a cappella group with Josh Segarra, and
You better.
and that he is the definition of like the most human sunrise of a human being
Ugh,
on the planet. And if people listening
we
haven't seen the other two, you must,
you have to. You
for
have to.
him. I mean, for everybody, but he's such a standout.
But for him. The other two. Here we are advertising
Oh, I'm
other
sorry.
people's
Okay.
shows
Yeah,
on this
yeah,
podcast.
right.
It's ridiculous. No, but Josh and I played basketball together on an intramural
Oh,
basketball
nice.
team for many years in New York, and he is as competitive as you would imagine he is in basketball
Love
as
it.
well, and very good. Okay, here we go. We're into the
Okay.
game. There's a little mini rounds here. The first one, these are all going to be little phrases, little words, no other big theme to
Okay.
this. Okay, we're just getting
Okay.
warmed up. Okay, so this, when repeated 3 times, can mean either etc. or shut up, depending how you say it. When repeated 3 times, it can mean etc. or shut
Blah
up.
blah blah.
Blah, blah, blah is
Yeah.
correct. You're 1 for 1. Alex. Oh, and we got a hand clap. He's the little bit of caring's coming. We love it.
It feels
Okay,
good. It
here we
feels good
go.
to win.
It's to start off with number
Feels
1.
good
It
to
feels good. Now you can only go
I'm
down
sure I
from
will.
here. Oars people seemingly need this word repeated 3 times in order to get any movement going. Perhaps it's because they are so existential.
Did you say oarsman?
Oarsmen.
Meaning
OARS. Exactly. Oars people is what I said, but it's a kind of a made-up
stroke.
We're going for row, row, row. Row, row, row your boat is what I
thought that was
going
too
for.
easy.
Not
I thought
stroke,
that was
stroke,
too
stroke.
easy. That seemed
No.
too easy.
They're starting off easy and
I
they
see.
get harder.
I
They
see.
get
I thought
harder,
I was
Alex.
gonna-
Okay. This syllable has no meaning on its own, but when repeated, becomes a Cuban dance and something you can shout when doing that dance.
Okay. It's one syllable?
Not easy. One syllable, single syllable, repeated 3 times, becomes a Cuban dance and something you could shout when doing that dance.
It's one syllable. That's what's killing me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it'll be 3 syllables when you
No,
say it
I
3
understand
times.
that, but the what single word is one syllable.
It's just 1 times 3 is 3.
Thank you. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't.
We're going with
Oh,
cha-cha-cha.
of course.
Cha-cha-cha
See, this is
was the right answer.
this
Hard,
is
but-
no, this is easier than I'm making it. This is
No, when you're looking at the answers on paper, it looks easy, but it's not always. It's not easy.
you know
to
what?
get
You're
there. All
right. When you don't have the
slightly
answers in
different.
front of you, it's very difficult.
It's
yeah,
harder.
much harder.
It's very hard. Again, I made this up,
Oh,
so
yeah.
of course easy. I think this way. Okay, this is our sports round. Here we are, Alex wearing an OKC Thunder sports hat. The phrase "for 3 goals in a row" in hockey does not involve a tip. Now, this is not repeated 3 times. This is just a trivia question.
Right.
The phrase "for 3
Yeah,
goals"
that's a hat
in
trick.
hockey. That's a hat trick. Correct. This I didn't know you were so into sports, so this part's going to
Well,
be easy.
we'll see.
The phrase "for 3 strikes in a row" in bowling is this delicious
Yes,
country.
it's a turkey.
Wow, I'm not.
Well,
would
let me
not have
tell you,
known
I
that.
can
Good
tell
for
you this.
too,
We
for
did
doing the
Broadway
sports.
bowling. Broadway bowling is a big part of the Broadway community. You do
Oh.
Broadway softball, Broadway bowling, and Broadway bowling is the reason I know about a turkey.
Alex, you're looking at 2 years ago, not reigning, but was for a while reigning champion of the Broadway show league. So believe me,
Of
I know a
bowling?
little something about the Broadway
Oh,
show
I see.
softball league, not bowling. No.
Congratulations.
Our softball. Thank you, Alex. Thank you. I wanted that. Okay, the phrase "for 3 outs in a row" in baseball or softball is not something you need to get dressed up for. 3 outs in baseball.
Three outs in baseball.
Yeah, or softball if you choose.
Wait, what was the last clue that you said?
It's not something you need to get dressed up for. These are just
No,
creative.
I know.
had
I
a
want
little
to.
something
I'm
creative at the
thinking
end,
what
okay.
it could. 3 outs in a row is the end of the inning.
An inning, yes. So it's not an outing. You know,
Oh,
something you
it's
need
an
to get
inning.
dressed up
Okay.
for. Come on, be with me. I'm getting
I love that.
creative
No.
with the clues. I'm trying
That's
to
really
help
good.
you.
I
you
like
know?
that.
All right, dare we do some Shakespeare? A Shakespeare edition?
Sure, we do whatever we want.
Here we go. Shakespeare edition. This word, repeated 3 times in the Scottish play, is separated by a pesky little and. It's an odd word to lead with when in a reflective
Tomorrow.
mood. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Well said. Okay, great. This 3 times repeated word in King Lear is famously bantered between Lear and Cordelia. It is impossible to describe and yet instantly understood if it exists
I have
at all.
no idea.
The word is
No.
nothing. Nothing, Nothing, my lord. Nothing will
Nope,
come
I
of
didn't have that
nothing.
at all. I don't.
Speaking of,
I would
okay,
never have
great.
had that.
I could have gotten you to there with the it can be funny too, because you said nothing can be funny. You had a little clue there. Okay, this three times repeated word in Hamlet is the very makeup of this question.
Uh,
He answers it to
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Polonius
yeah,
as a little extra.
yeah.
It is the makeup of this very
Yes.
question.
Um, it has to do with the.
You're talking about poor
No,
Yorick?
I'm on the
It's
wrong.
not nothing
I
to do
don't
with poor
know.
Yorick. It's the words, words, words. He says words,
I
words,
like
words.
you're sort of
All right, we're gonna
like a
do.
little bit of the host of what's the one where the host is kind of mean to you? Kind of like
No,
kind of
Simon
no
from
the
American
weakest
Idol.
link.
No,
You're sort of like
you
you have
are
like a
the
little
weakest
bit of
link.
like a little sardonic little
Oh,
like cutting
you've
little
gotten it
jab that
wrong.
you give to every wrong answer that I really am enjoying. And I mean that genuinely.
That is fully intentional. Pop culture. This three times repeated word might evoke a 70s era TV show, or it might evoke a Zoom meeting. Three times repeated name
Uh a Zoom meeting. Uh
with many boxes, if that helps. Zoom meeting with many boxes.
I don't have it.
We're going for Marsha, 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 if we ever did the Brady Bunch. Shout out, we currently have an MTCA student who is Marsha, Marsha, Marsha on RuPaul's
Is
Drag
that
Race.
right?
Shout out to you, Marsha. Yeah, what
Rock
a small
on.
world. Okay, the this three times repeated word might have better said what might have better been said one less time to a birdie if you're more into musical theater than 90s boy
I
band.
mean, it was
Three times
bye
repeated
bye.
word.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye bye
bye bye
bye.
bye, of
Of
course. Bye
course.
bye
I went to see the
bye.
NSYNC No Strings Attached tour, and it was the best concert of my life.
That you're more in sync than Shakespeare. We're
Yeah, yeah,
learning
yeah.
about you, Alex. We're learning. We're
I'm very
digging in and
layered.
we're learning. The Office popularized this three times repeated word, which describes an optimal solution for Michael Scott and something DJ Khaled knows a little something about.
um, uh, three times.
An optimal solution for Michael Scott.
No idea. This is great.
It's a
Okay.
win-win-win
Yeah, this is.
negotiation if you ever watched The
I don't
Office.
watch it as religiously as like some people in my family, but the DJ Khaled thing, I would have no idea.
All he does is win-win-win no matter
Oh,
what. He's got money on his mind and he's got some other
God,
things
I don't know. I
that he
don't know
wants to
if I'm a
talk about
DJ
too.
Khaled guy.
Let's wrap with musical theater. We've our last one is musical theater. These are not particularly hard, though I'll say very easy. A lot of repetition in musical theater. You may know
Yeah.
this. This iconic titular phrase is repeated at the end of Sondheim's company's seminal number and is something you could not accuse Sondheim
Being alive.
of. Being alive is correct.
That is the worst way to end that question.
This month is iconically repeated three times in a carousel song and went viral when Leslie Uggams
Yeah,
stumbles around.
Joan.
Yeah. Joan.
Yeah.
See, that's where the right age. You're the right.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
like, we
yeah,
would have
that
watched this video when it was
a
YouTubing
ringtone, I
back in the
imagine,
day.
at one point.
I'm sure. All right. Last but not least, this titular phrase is repeated three times at the end of a Valjean song in Les Mis. It might be said by a third base coach or a proud.
That's
new
great.
fan.
These are great questions, and it's excellent. It's Bring 'em
Bring
home,
him home.
and I love it.
You brought us
That's
home.
fantastic.
Coming down 3 for 3 on the musical
By
theater
the way,
section.
that went sports and musical theater.
Sports and musical theater, you crush. Pop culture, okay. Shakespeare, iffy. The rest was iffy, but pretty good overall. You've won the game. You've done enough to win the game for sure. I know we're gonna.
I feel like on podcasts, if you play a game, even if you get all the answers wrong, usually the host goes, "You won the game."
You've won. There's no losing and winning. You get triple the
Yeah.
salary we're paying you for being on this podcast.
Thank you.
Coming.
Thank you very much.
Talk to me about. So I want to hear a little bit about what you're here to plug, and also maybe just your relationship with social media, plugging in general. Like what is Alex Brightman in the world of? I'm jumping on podcasts. How do you sort of get your brand out to the world and plug things that you're doing? And what is your relationship with that process?
My relationship with social media used to be pretty okay,
Uh-huh.
pretty amicable. And then with a bit of your star rising a little, there becomes that sort of culture of like people want to see you succeed and then they
Mm-hmm.
want to cut you down and
Mm-hmm.
they want to see. So I did experience enough of that, which wasn't a ton, but just enough invasion or invasive kind of like stuff, which to really no fault of a ton of people's. I think it's just a lot of like parasocial relationshipy kind of stuff
Mm-hmm.
that just didn't work with me. And it works with some, and they were being genuinely kind. And I pulled away from social media. But I think that because of how my career started and is going, I haven't seen a dip
Uh-huh.
in what I've been able to achieve and accomplish without it. So I think I kind of hit a very lucky little time there. But when I do, I mean, the only thing I have social media wise that you can find is an Instagram that I do a couple of Instagram lives on when I do these
Mm-hmm.
kind of live signings for the cartoons that I'm on.
Uh-huh.
So you can, I mean, tag me, I guess, at on Instagram, Brightman, some say.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's it. But you won't find, I don't post on it. I just, do
You do these little lives, you do whatever.
lives
Yeah.
and
But you,
yeah. So the way I get myself out there is I get myself out there.
yep.
It's like, I think that I don't post pictures of what I'm doing. I just go do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if it works, it works. My downtime is very precious to me now. And so my downtime is no longer looking at other people wishing I was
Oh,
them.
so true. But here you are to promote a little something. So plug away. Talk to us about it.
Yes,
What do people
yes,
need to hear about?
yes. Well, this is, I mean, I've been doing a full day of this, which has been really fun because we recorded it a minute ago. Uh, Lou Berger, who is, Keith, Alex, and Huey, for the people that know the fans, and if you know the Try Guys and all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff, we got a chance to meet during Beetlejuice, and then they sort of became like, I'd say, like diet texting buddies, like not all the time, but enough. And
Not about
they had
diets. You're
me
just saying light. You didn't do it a lot.
like a light
Okay.
texting
It wasn't
relationship,
like
yeah.
you're my accountability buddy on
Like sharing, yeah,
Ozempic or
sharing
whatever.
tips.
Yeah.
That's right. No, don't try something.
Mhm.
Or do.
Or
I
two.
don't know.
Not
I
no.
don't. Yeah, I don't care. I have no stake in the company. Um, but they just thought I was funny, and the feeling was mutual. And when they had their group, Lou Berger did this show called The Wizard of Friendship
Mm-hmm.
off Broadway, and I was so proud of them because it was so cool to go from like being these internet kind of influencery, like content creators, to like wanting to do theater.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on board with that 100%. And so they asked me to do a cameo. They asked me for advice about the show. I did a cameo in the show, which was fun and one matinee silliness. And then they asked me to be on this album of the show,
Mm.
which I found to be extremely flattering. Me and Wayne Brady and a couple other fun people are on the album. It's super silly. It's very much their type of comedy and brand. Um, I play a character named Flim Flam the Sausage Man,
Mm.
which is easily, it's got to be the best character name I've ever had in anything.
For sure. From
Um,
Bach to Dewey to Flim Flam the Sausage Man. It all makes
yeah, and
sense.
it's coming out this month, the album, and it's super fun. I implore you all to listen to it. There are some absurd songs to the point of lunacy. I'm on it a few times, singing a very funny sort of coup de théâtre kind of song,
Mm.
a bit of a twist, which I won't spoil for you.
Mm-hmm. Do we know how
But
it's
yeah, I
available? Is
mean,
it available online? Are
I
people
think it's
downloading it?
everywhere you listen to music. I think it's literally going to be on every platform where music is available to you. That's where you can find it. And you just Lou Berger, The Wizard of Friendship. And it's
Love
a
it.
story of, friends becoming friends and rediscovering their friendship. But it's extremely silly. And as I like to say, if you learn anything from this show, you've done it completely wrong. It's just a lot of fun. And I know they already have a big cult fan base and well earned, but I think this will only elevate it.
I love it. Well, that's certainly not true of the show. If you learn something from the show, you're doing it right, is what I say.
Oh, yeah,
And
definitely.
I'll throw my last question to you, which is just any advice for those young people out there who are trying to follow in your footsteps and maybe not be an exact replica of an Alex Brightman, but to live an Alex Brightman like life. What advice would you give to those young people as they sort of pursue their career?
This goes back to the college thing. Because I think it's good to wrap it up this way, is that college, didn't work for me, but that does not mean it won't work for you. And all the learning you do is not the gospel. There are no true experts in theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's up to you to really be your own kind of sieve. We've been talking about it a lot, but to see what works for you, because just because something really works for somebody, it may not even close to work for you. So it is about kind of this tool belt that you hear about
Mm-hmm.
in college a lot, and just making sure that it looks like yours and being okay that you don't have the thing the other person has. But the other thing about college, the advice that I have that is vital, and especially as someone who dropped out of college, and I think this is important coming from me, is that one of the things I think I would have gained more of were I to have stayed and done better is college is a good place not only to learn, but to get this backbone group of friends
Mm,
that will lift you up when you are in bad places, because theater is no guarantee. And theater is a hobby that turns into a passion, and passions can break your heart.
mm,
Hobbies is easy. You're in community theater, yeah, it's a weekend of shows.
mhm,
When you decide that you're going to go to college and invest in yourself as an artist, it's risky and it's heartbreaking. So when you go to college, yes, learn, yes, all that, but be with people, encourage people, be loving, learn how to be a good friend, because later that pays off in dividends if you just are lonely and you want to talk to somebody
mm,
about not booking something.
mm,
It just makes it easier when you're not alone. And so I had to kind of like scrounge together some friends after those 2 years that I didn't have in
mm.
college. And boy, am I glad I did. But I think that college is such a good place to find those friends. So don't waste that part of it.
I think
Find
so.
time to make friends.
So well said, and something we talk about a lot of like with our alumni of like find your community, whether it's from college,
Yes.
whether it's however you do it, but you cannot survive in this industry without a community.
You don't act alone. You don't audition alone. You do almost nothing alone in
Hmm.
this business. And so to think that you do is crazy. So the more people, wonderful, honest people that you surround yourself with, I think it's just a better go, even if it doesn't go well.
Yep. And once you have a child, you don't go to the bathroom alone anymore, Alex. I'm telling you, nothing
Well,
is
I mean,
alone.
I just have this guy. I just have,
Oh, yes.
I just have,
For the listeners, this is a beautiful dog curled.
his
He
name is,
couldn't care less about this game in the same way that Alex didn't care. Also,
he just
completely.
cares. He just cares about me
Mm.
peeing and not me peeing, him peeing. Um,
Specifically, Alex
yeah,
peeing.
he goes to the
Well,
bathroom with me as well.
I can't think of a better place to end this show. Alex, thanks so much for the time today. This was such a pleasure, man.
It's my absolute pleasure, and I hope to do it again soon.